today. I think that the Lord would have to ask us today. And I have really good biblical reasons for asking it. So, for those of you who think you're actually not going to say that right, Jesus said a lot of things that kind of woke people up. It'll make sense in a few minutes. Question I have to ask today is, so are you one who stands your ground? There's been a lot of conversation about that over issues of violence. Texas is a stand your ground state. Ohio tried to make that decision, but lawmakers were kind of gutless and didn't actually make that change. People have very strong opinions about it. So I'm going to ask you, are you one who stands your ground? While I ask the question, it probably won't make sense until the end of what I have to say. I want to read a few verses out of Matthew chapter 24 before we look at the actual parables that he was talking about. In Matthew chapter 24, if you want to turn there, he's talking about the end times and signs of the end times. And then he goes into 25 talking about parables. The parables were to explain what he was trying to say about the end times. So we're going to look at those parables. That's going to be the major focus of what we look at. But you have to understand the context. And the context was that those parables were giving a lesson, understanding, and teaching. It was kind of like giving somebody an illustration of the substance of what you were trying to say. And so you tell this story. The substance of what he was trying to say was in Matthew 24. But the way we teach on the parables is we just look at the parable and people go off onto tangents of what they mean and they don't put it in the context. The parable of the 10 virgins, the parable of the talents, the parable of the sheep and the goats, all of those parables were in the context of end times teaching, but it's never usually presented that way. At least I haven't heard it presented that way. And so in Matthew 24, we're not going to focus on 24, but we have to put it in context. In Matthew 24, it says in verse 3, as he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately and said, "So tell us, when will these things be?" Again, the end times things, the destruction of the temple, and he has much more to say. "And what will be the sign of your coming at the end of the age?" Jesus answered them, "See that no one lead you astray. For many are going to come in my name saying, 'I'm the Christ,' and they'll lead many astray, and you will hear wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not alarmed. For this must take place, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All of these are but the beginning of the birth pains. Then they will deliver you up to tribulation and put you to death, and you'll be hated by all nations for my name's sake. And then many will fall away and betray one another and hate one another. And many false prophets will arise and lead many astray. And because lawlessness will be increased, the love of many will grow cold, but the one who endures to the end will be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed through the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come." I want to read 11 and 12 and 13 again. "And many false prophets will arise and lead many astray." Do you see that? Many are going to go astray because they're going to be led by false prophets. And because lawlessness will be increased, the love of many will grow cold, but the one who endures to the end will be saved. Now I'm going to say some things that I'm going to probably have a few, at least quietly. And this isn't just to tick people off. This is serious stuff. We have a world that the levels of hate just keep getting hotter and hotter. The levels of hate, I'm telling you what, they just come in hotter and hotter. And we have people who once taught agape love, who are some of the biggest voices. All I have to do is mention Israel in a non-biblical context, and people are like, well, what's he going to say? Is he pro-Palestinian? Is he pro-Israel? We have people, and I can give you the illustrations, look them up. It's all in the news. We have people in the church, people who once taught about agape love, that are saying things about what's going on in the Middle East. And I'm like, well, where is the agape love in that? And I hear people justifying those who are anti-Israel. Where's the agape love in that? We're talking about people who believe in Jesus Christ. I'm not talking about the world. We have false prophets. False prophets are people who say they have words from God, but they're misleading. That's what a false prophet is. And a false prophet who is leading people down a path away from agape love. I mean, I looked it up. But the agape love of many will grow cold. If there are people who are recognizing, calling themselves as spokesmen for God, that are leading people down that path where agape love is growing cold. Look at Revelations. Church, what they had to say to the Ephesians church. Look at what they had to say to the church at Laodicea. Ephesians, it was the problem that Jesus had with the church at Ephesus. They didn't have the same kind of love when they first got saved. What did he have a problem with Laodicea? They were just lukewarm. Guys, we live in a world now. People want to preach those passages, and we live in a world now where we've seen people go a lot further than that. We live in a world now where I would contend that the reason I think we're in the end times isn't because of what all these other guys are saying. It's because I think I'm seeing agape love growing cold. And that's what Jesus said you're going to see. So when you come to the parables, and we're just going to do a thumb sketch of the parables. And here's why we're going to do a thumb sketch. We can't get too granular with it. We're going to do that next week and the next week, Lord willing. Because if you get granular, you miss the big picture. We want to get the big picture and put it into context first. And so we're going to just look at some pretty broad things that each of these have in common. So there's so much more to say about them, but I'm going to really try to exercise discipline and just focus on those broad brushstrokes. So when he talks about the parable of the 10 virgins, the parable of the talents, the sheep and the goats, there's a couple things that I think are just curiously similar. When he talked about the other parables we've studied for weeks, he said things like this. He said the kingdom, in chapter 13, there's a whole bunch of them. The kingdom of heaven may be compared to, or is compared to, or the kingdom of heaven is like. It's in the present tense. You can look them up later. Like I said, we're trying to give a bird's eye view. We've been looking at this for weeks. But it's interesting because here in verse 1 of chapter 25, he says, then the kingdom of heaven will be like. Will be like. And each of these in this chapter are saying the same things. It's talking about a time that's going to come, and this is what it's going to be like. And he's trying to talk about what it's going to be like in a parable form, a story form, an illustration of what I just was talking about out of chapter 24. He's telling them 2,000 years ago, here's what the end times are going to be like. And then he tells these to say what that's like. So with the other parables, where he's talking about, no, kingdom of heaven is here. This is what it's like. This is what it should be like. This is what my kingdom on earth is going to look like. It's going to look like the mustard tree, where you got all kinds of things coming and finding a place of hospitality. It's going to be like that mustard tree that's a single season tree that grows. There's so much I could say about that I've already said. I don't want to get. It's going to be like the fisherman's net that tosses out the net and brings in the bad fish you don't eat, the good fish, the ugly fish, the smelly fish, all fish. They're sorted out at the end of the age. It's like the farmer that plants and he has a great crop going, and somebody comes and sows seeds and he says, just leave the weeds and the tares grow together. All this is talking, I could keep going. All this is talking about here and now. But when he gets to 25, he shifts. And he shifts to say, but the kingdom of heaven will be like this. There's going to come a time it's going to be like this. And that time, again, verse 24, chapter 24, that time is in the end times. And that time is what's going to happen immediately after the end times, when the judgment happens. And so when it says, then the kingdom of heaven will be like, I just want to make that point. It's huge. Verse 31, when the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit on his glorious throne. It's a time that's coming, but let me assure you, that time is coming. But the other thing I want to talk about is not just that it's about the end times, and about what I think we're starting to see, if we aren't seeing it turn into a raging fire. He says something else I think is fascinating. He says it's going to be like 10 virgins. You see that? You're going to think, of course we know that. I'm going to read it. He's making a point that I don't think we get. The kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps out and went to meet the bridegroom. The parable of the talents. Do you know what he says? He says, it'll be like a man going on a journey who called his servants, I'm down in verse 14, and entrusted to them his property. Who's them? Well, it's the them is 3 people. One received 5 talents, one received 2, and one received 1. So in the first story about the parable of the virgins, it's all 10 of them, guys. This is important. I'll explain why in a second. When it's the parable of the talents, it's all 3 of them. And when he gets down to the sheep and the goats, it's the sheep and the goats. These are all presented like, well, the goats are the unbelievers. This is always presented like the guy that buries his talent is the unbeliever. It's always presented like the 5 foolish virgins who didn't do what they were supposed to do. They weren't prepared. I can't tell you how many times I've heard it preached and taught. You got to give your life to Jesus so you're prepared. You can give your life to Jesus and still not be prepared. You can give your life to Jesus and be led astray. You can give your life to Jesus and serve the master. You took the talent. You know that he's given you a talent, and you can go bury it. He's not talking to the unbelievers. He says the kingdom of heaven will be like this. It'll be like 10 virgins, not just the 5. Do you understand? There's going to come a day when people who think they're good because they believe in Jesus. Do you understand? There's going to be some surprised people because they thought when they should have humbled themselves and listened. The sheep and the goats. The goats aren't talking about unbelievers. They're talking about kingdom people. They're talking about those people that 24:12 talked about. I'm going to trip over this. 24:12 said, let me ask this. Who has agape love? We've been talking about it all week with our service group. The only people that have agape love are the one. Agape love comes from God through Jesus Christ. It's a love the world doesn't understand. You can't fake that. You can't duplicate it. It's a love that comes from God. It's a different kind of love. We're talking about people who understood agape love. They've been learning about it. They've been taught about it. And they're saying, I believe. Saw a movie the other day, and I don't want to mention it because it just sounds like I'm being critical. Actually had a good message. But it presented discipleship as opposed to believers. And it presented this idea that you can believe in Jesus and yet not be a disciple. That's a gospel I don't understand. Because the gospel I understand is that if you become a believer, you're committing your life to discipleship. We live in a world today where Christianity and church going, it's all about what you think, what you accept. And Jesus is saying, no, it's about what you think, what you accept, and turning over your heart and being about my agape love. And being about my agape love, you know what? You're not going to be the 5 virgins who think you're ready for the bridegroom, but you haven't prepared yourself. They believed he was coming, and they had their lamps. And you know what? Even the 5 who were prepared and had the extra oil and all that, the ability to trim their lamps, they all became drowsy. Did you think about that? You can look at it later. What was the difference? The difference was that 5 of them, they ran out. They ran out. The parable of the talents. One's given 5. There's so much to say about the parable of the talents. I'm trying to just stay on point like I said I would. We're going to look at it later because there's so much more to say. But they're given, the word in the Bible, in the ESV says, they're entrusted 5 talents that actually came from the owner. So he's given them 5 talents that reflect his gifts, his values. And they actually take the risk of investing it. The one with given 2, same. And then there is one who buried it. They were all servants of the person who entrusted him this. It wasn't like one buried it because he's not my master. He's not. I don't recognize him. Okay, he gave me this thing. Whatever. No, he actually feared him so much he buried it because he was fearful. He was a servant of that person. None of these are talking about somebody who's not a kingdom person. This is sobering. And the parable of the sheep and goats, just look at it carefully, which we're going to do in the coming weeks. Do you know what it actually says? It says the people who were the sheep, he says, you're blessed by the Father. When you saw me hungry, when you saw me thirsty, when you saw me naked, when you saw me in prison, when you saw me, you actually did something. You gave. You clothed. He goes through, we're going to look at that later. But you did something. And they're like, when did we see you? And he says, and he gives me the answer. You did this to the least of these, you did it unto me. And then he looks at the goats and he says, you didn't see me. He said, I was hungry. You gave me no food. I was thirsty. You gave me no drink. I was a stranger. You did not welcome me. Naked, and you did not clothe me. Sick and in prison, you didn't visit me. I was the one that you canceled. Did you hear that? I was the one you canceled. I was the one you thought was toxic. I was the one you wanted to avoid. And they said, when did that happen? Do you notice both parties are surprised? They're both surprised because they both thought they were kingdom people. It was all good. As we live in a culture that this cancel thing is out of control. And it has been ingrained in us from the beginning of things like social media. And we participate in it like, well, this makes sense. It might make sense in a worldview, from a worldview. But I want to know something. Where's the agape love? What Jesus had to say was, what he was trying to say was, agape love is like the 5 virgins who were prepared. They did what they were supposed to do. And you know what? Okay, they got drowsy, but when the hour ran late, they were prepared. They actually gave forethought to it and they were ready. It wasn't just a presentation of being ready. And this parable of the talents. I entrusted you, and what did you do? My purposes were for a fruitful kingdom. You know, like the parable where he talks about the parable of the 4 different kinds of soil. Only one of those soils does he celebrate, and the one that's 30, 60, and 100-fold, where there's fruitfulness. The sheep and the goats. So you saw it. You understood it, and you dug in and resisted being about agape love. For what reason? Why again? Yeah, you were misled by false prophets. Because in chapter 24:12, he says, and lawlessness will be increased. Because of lawlessness will be increased. The love of many will grow cold. But the one who endures to the end will be saved. Do you know what that word in the Greek means? Endured. Do you know what it means? Straight out of the Greek lexicon, I kid you not. Stand your ground. Stand your ground. That's what it means. What it means is a defiance, a determination, a defiance in a positive way, a determination in a positive way. And so you might be tempted. You might be tempted to be lackadaisical as the 5 virgins who weren't ready when the time came. You might be tempted to bear your talent because you're intimidated or fearful for whatever reason. You might be tempted to see that need, and yet it's uncomfortable. So you go to the other side of the street or you avoid it. You somehow justify not being about agape love. You can do that all day long. Question is, who does he say are the blessed ones? Who does he say are actually in the good place? It's going to be those in the kingdom of heaven, and it isn't going to be everybody. He's going to be those in the kingdom of heaven who stood their ground. Stood their ground in the face of whatever threatened it. Not holding a gun, but the determination to be about his agape love. There's no, please hear this. There's no shut off for agape love. We're supposed to be giving freely. As has been given us, so we're to give. The cup is supposed to be overflowing and abounding. As he pours in his agape love, it's supposed to be going out indiscriminately. So, are you coming in hot with influences from the world? Or are you coming in hot with agape love? That no matter what slaps you in the face, what the challenge is, no matter how much hate is raging in the world, you are the one who says, no, here I stand. I'm standing my ground with his agape love. Jesus says, in the end times, the love of many, the agape love of many, will grow cold. But those who endure to the end, who stand their ground to the end, will be saved. There's not a tier system. That's called, some kind of form of legalism. Well, you kind of did this, so you get this. You get the. We're supposed to be coming in hot with agape love, no matter the cold around us. Let's have a word of prayer. Father, I just want to thank you for your word. I want to thank you for your love for us. I want to thank you for the incredible, wonderful time of worship we had. Our worship talked about this. You've given us life. You call us out of our graves because your purpose is that we be a garden in the midst of this battlefield of hatred in the world. God, that we would rise and shine with your light. We would stand our ground without flinching with your agape love in the face of whatever. We worship you and praise you. Lord, as we look at these parables, give us more and more wisdom and understanding. Because as in the parable of the talents, I want to hear, well done, thou good and faithful servant. I know it's kind of a long shot, but that's what I want to hear. So just give us more and more wisdom and understanding. And that if we do anything, we stand our ground with your agape love. We worship you. We bless you. God, help us to understand that's a position of being blessed, not cursed. Blessed by our Father because you show up in the worst of the moments. Your power and your presence is with us, and you overcome the evil around with your good. So, God, that we just receive that and stand our ground in your river of life. Hallelujah. In your name I pray, amen.